Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's saying that we have Charlie Andersen, CEO at Burro, a company solving the crushing labor problem faced by farmers through robots. So welcome, Charlie. Super happy to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, Lisa, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me on. Name is Charlie Andersen. I grew up on a working fruit and vegetable farm in Pennsylvania, so on the east coast of the US. And for me growing up, I think I loved kind of machinery and technology used to do work outdoors. And what I really disliked on my family farm was getting out of an air-conditioned tractor cab where I could push buttons to do a lot of work. And instead of having to do work by hand on the ground, and on a fruit and vegetable farm in particular, a large portion of the week, probably like 90% or more, takes place with manual labor. And so kind of my lifelong obsession has been how do you do things with machinery and technology rather than, you yourself doing it in a not so expeditious, kind of boring, tedious way. And fast forward a bit, I worked for a number of different companies, and then got an MBA and got out of the business school and took a really, really funky role with a company called CNH, which is Deere's largest competitor. And there, part of my job was looking at autonomy companies from an acquisition perspective. And I also was doing a lot of like selling and marketing of machinery to farmers. And from that came to the conclusion that the way to get into the robotics space in ag was not to work for a big company, but was rather to start something myself. And so I quit that job and found my two co-founders, Terry and Vibor. And since then, we've gone from basically a team of 3 guys in an unheated barn with a dog to a team of about 40 today. And we have one of the largest deployed fleets of robots in ag at the moment. And the product we build is a robot called Burro. And Burros, you can kind of think of them as like Disney's WALL-E for work outdoors in a 1.0 format. So what does it actually mean? It's a computer vision-based autonomous ground vehicle that can carry, can tow, can scout, and can patrol in semi-GPS denied to fully GPS denied environments alongside people. And they're used today a lot in vineyards, nurseries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, solar crops, and beyond. So that's a little bit about me, perhaps a little bit long-winded, and happy to double click on any of those topics.
And I mean, talking about Burro and about what you guys are doing, I know that you guys were just elected as a top 10 product at the 2023 World Ag Expo for the second year in a row. So congratulations on that. And I mean, what do you think this announcement means for the company?
Yeah, so last year we were the top 10 product at the World Ag Expo, which is the largest farm show in the world. This year we received it for a second year in a row, and for a slightly newer iteration of the product. I think what we're discovering is that moving safely alongside people, or effectively what we're building is the first point and click interface for a vehicle to be directed and to move autonomously safely alongside people, up and down rows and along long autonomous routes. And if you have that functionality, and you have a vehicle that is 4-wheel drive and processing 2 terabytes of imagery per hour of runtime and has a big GPU and a CPU on board and is online as well, you can build that product in such a way that other entities can build layers on top. And so the top 10 product this year at the World Ag Expo is actually a collaboration between us and another company called Bitwise Agronomy. And so our systems can now navigate up and down blocks of vineyards and berries. And as they do that, they're running a bunch of AI locally that is scanning each and every vine in the field and spitting out a count in real time of the number of crops in the field that you can then click into. And what's cool about it is we are doing the mobility part and the processing part, and Bitwise is providing the crop AI. So it's kind of a collaboration to yield more value for our customer base, which I find really exciting. I think that my opinion is that the way the robotics is going to evolve is it's not going to be one company doing everything. It's going to be companies building layers. We're doing the mobility layer, and others can build stuff on top of our system that creates more customer value, which again, to me is quite exciting.
I think it is really exciting. And was it hard in order to find another company in order to collaborate? Since it's kind of like a new market, if we can put it like that.
In a way, I think we get probably 5 to 10 reach outs from companies every week who are looking to put different cool things on top of our system. So I've had a ton of crop AI companies where like today they have to put a guy on an ATV and have that guy drive up and down rows at 2 miles an hour all day long to capture data. And we have a vehicle that can go up and down rows all day long autonomously and has cameras on board already. So in short, we get tons of companies looking to provide crop AI via our product. And so in short, I think that there's an abundance of potential applications where you can bolt an attachment on one of our Burro vehicles or add some additional AI to the vehicle to either counter perceive, or perceive and manipulate, or perceive and touch, or mow, or do something else to something in the environment. And that's really, really exciting when you start thinking about all of the things that people do outdoors that no longer should be done by people in my view.
Super interesting. And especially, I mean, that was actually my next question. I was about to ask you like how hard it was to educate people, you know, like thinking about the beginnings of the company.
Idea number one for this company was trying to build a robot to pick up dead chickens. As crazy as that might sound, so I went to lunch with this guy, and his family had a bunch of these things called broiler houses where they grow chickens. Basically, when you grow chickens, you put like 30,000 birds in a house. And if you have 30,000 of any living animal in a house for a period of time, a portion of them will not survive. And so idea number one was build a robot to pick up dead chickens. And that was I guess could be interesting commercially, but was really distasteful in terms of like the beacon core thing to build a company around. And separately, it was really, really hard to do. So I pivoted from that concept as Terry and Vibor, my two co-founders, joined. And we pivoted to this concept of a robot that could be used for a variety of carrying, towing, scouting, patrolling, and manipulation type tasks alongside people. And I would say that the idea since that point forward has really kind of left me as the sole contributor. And it's really become like a really collaboration heavy thing, where what we have done is we tended to push stuff into the field before it's ready and gathered a ton of customer feedback, and then tried to iterate very rapidly to drive a minimally viable product into something that people will really pay for at scale. And fast forward a bit, we're like 8 generations in, with all outsourced production. We've done about 50,000 autonomous miles on the platform. If you're a laborer in the field and you're harvesting fruit, and our system shows up, people can almost immediately intuitively understand what it does. Hey, like I just pick fruit and I put this fruit on this device and it runs it out, and I don't have to like wheel around a 200 or 300 pound wheelbarrow all day long on 110 degree heat. Like that's the immediate value proposition that our vehicle brings, which is really quick and intuitive to most people. And then making that vehicle quick and easy and intuitive for anybody to operate has definitely been a journey.
I think it's amazing. And if I have learned anything from past interviews, is that customer feedback is the key. So I need to ask, like, what do you think it has been the biggest progress since you started at the company?
This is going to sound really silly. I think especially to you, perhaps kind of, sitting I guess sitting in Mexico and being very fluent in Spanish. One of the biggest surprises for us as a team, as silly as it sounds, is that when you're selling a vehicle that is used by laborers in the field in California, nobody in the field speaks English. It's almost exclusively a Spanish speaking audience. So you've got really you have some of, if not the hardest working people on the planet in the field in California. And initially, as a bunch of, people from the east coast of the US kind of flying out to California and getting into that area, we didn't really understand going into it that like everyone in the field was going to speak Spanish. And so fast forward a bit, and we hired out a big sales and support team who are nearly all come from a background where like their parents worked in the fields, or they have worked in the fields at some point. And they've also are all like incredibly educated as engineers also. And so they bring this like superpower where they can go into the field and communicate and understand what the customer pain point actually is. I think that to me, that ultimately a product is all about the people, and getting great people on the ground who understand the customer pain point and communicate with them on their terms, and then can iterate towards what they want, has been like probably one of the things that's expedited our progress more so than anything else.
And now one of my next questions, I mean, normally we speak with CEOs and founders in the hardware industry, and most of them are really involved in the procurement process of their companies. So I need to ask you, like, how close are you to this process? I know that you guys have an operations team, so how does that work at Burro?
We've been through 8 generations of hardware. And this kind of hardware, it's not like one or two things. You've got a mobile base. It's got motors, hubs, wheels, tires, inner tubes, wheel encoders, cabling, weatherproofing, waterproofing, steel chassis, assembly on the front and the rear, batteries, and then a brain box that sits within the brain box. You have probably 400 components. GPU, CPU, cooling system, GPS receiver, et cetera. So within all of that, each one of those individual components sits within a broader system. And there's a lot of interplay between each individual component from like a interference, positioning perspective, et cetera. And so what we have found, the first 6 generations or so, we did every single thing in-house, top to bottom. I guess for the first 5.5 generations, we did everything top to bottom. Then by generation 6, we reached a stage where we had a couple of sub-assemblies. So like we could get cabling done by somebody, we could source a brain box from a vendor who did it for us, we could source source a mobile base from a vendor who did it for us. And then where we are today on our core product that we sell regularly is we have an outsourced supply chain where we've got a couple of different vendors that do the sub assemblies and then one vendor that does the final assembly. And that's like for the steady state part of the business where we're just producing stuff regularly. That's how that part works. And then on the new product development side, then you go right back into the earlier stage thing where you're sourcing a bunch of components that all interplay a bit and really do require that you're talking with like early stage companies either in the US or in Asia who are building particular subcomponents that we want to test. And they got to go for this test, validation, and then prototyping, and then more of a production thing. And I think in the early stage part of the process, that in particular is pretty messy for us. And candidly, a lot of like spreadsheets, phone calls, and the kind of engineering group kind of assessing things. So that's maybe a little bit, that might not be the clearest answer, but we've been through an evolution. All production at this point is outsourced at some level with one vendor doing the final assembly. And then in the early stage stuff, when we're designing what we're going to sell, next year and the year onwards, that again goes right back to the, spreadsheets, figuring things out, et cetera, and probably could be a cleaner process at some level. Yep.
And one of the last questions, what will you say are the next steps for Burro?
We're growing quickly. We are finally reaching the point. It's actually kind of a funny thing. I think building the physical part of a robot is definitely difficult. Building the autonomy that underlies it is this intense, rapid, iterative process where solving these problems that are so intuitive for you as a person that you don't even realize it, but are actually like monumentally complex or difficult to do well at scale. So said another way, we've gone from, 2018 when we first went to the field, every single mile that a robot traveled, it would have like 11.19 failure cases within that single mile traveled. Fast forward a bit, we're now at the point where we can go 20 to 25 or so autonomous miles without a human having to intervene at all. And so we're suddenly at a point where we can actually ship a product in a box without shipping a person with that box to set it up, make sure it works for customers, and make sure it works reliably. So we're suddenly at a point where we can actually ship stuff to other regions of the US, not just California, other parts of the world, i.e. Australia, South America, et cetera, Europe, et cetera. And increasingly, the product can be used not just in vineyards, but also in nurseries and berries and solar panel sites and beyond. And I think in our space, what I can see is that there are a ton of sectors where there's demand for movement of a vehicle safely alongside people that can support other applications. And we're like just cracking open the door a tiny bit. And like what's beyond it is really exciting. And near in, it's scale product within a larger and larger group of customers, and then start to ship into some of these new geographies and new use cases where we see tons of demand.
And I can imagine, you guys are growing. How many engineers do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I think, we're 40 people today, and we'll probably grow, guys can continue growing through this year. Of those 40 people, I think 4 or 5 people don't have engineering degrees, myself included. So we're like very, very heavily engineering oriented. And I think that a company can be defined. So to me, the definition of a company scaling in this space, companies truly scaling when at least half of the team is kind of commercially oriented at some level and half of the team is building. We're not there yet. And I think that as we're starting to sell more and we're starting to invest more in the commercial side, that really, to me, is kind of the first step in really scaling a commercial business.
And last but not least, Charlie, if you can share a piece of advice for future engineers or future CEOs starting on this path?
Yeah, so I think unequivocally get into the field where your product is going to be used. And I'm using field not in the literal sense. Get into the environment in which you think the product will be used and show people stuff that is embarrassingly laughable as early as you possibly can, because no matter what you have in your head, you could be the most, like maybe you are Steve Jobs and maybe you can envision the iPad before it exists, but for most mere mortals, you don't know what a customer actually wants until you get it into their hands. And it should be it should not be ready in your view. You should rapidly get it out there. And I think with autonomy in particular, this really, really applies because you can't tell what a product needs to actually do until you get it into an environment. For me, like the iterative cycle is the superpower of moving quickly with an autonomy product in the real world.
That was a great advice, and being open to feedback. Guys, if you're hearing this, I think that's the key. You just heard it from the expert. So thank you so much, Charlie, for being here once again, for sharing your experiences, your advices. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people find the company?
Yeah, you can find us at www.burro.ai. That's BURRO.ai is an artificial intelligence. And you can also email me at Charlie, CHARLIE @burro.ai as well. And you can also check us out. If you do a search for #GoodBurro, you should see a bunch of our stuff running too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one with Charlie, directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Charlie, thank you for being here. Thank you for being at Builder Nation.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.